Hello all, Game Methuselah. Did you miss me? I know it's been a few months since I've done a video. I had a few disappointments and a couple first world problems I had to deal with. And then one day I broke my pencil and that sort of sent me into a tizzy, and I have been sort of just hanging low here, haunting in my manor house and scaring the neighbors over the last few months. But I want to do a quick video and get back into it. I've still been gaming a lot, doing a lot of things, still going to estate sales. In fact, behind me you'll see the official flag of Venice. It's number one on my bucket list of places to go, and I really am looking forward to it. Plus, I think it's very cool for a city to have a Dungeons & Dragons monster as their main symbol. The other thing I've been doing, and I'll more likely show you this later, is still collecting Dungeons & Dragons paraphernalia for my role-playing adventures at every place I can imagine. Estate sales. This one came from the Long Beach Assistant League on 4th Street. They're getting ready for Christmas, so they decided to make everything in their store half price. So I had to go and find interesting things, and of course, I found this. And it was already cheap, and then they cut it in half and are giving it away, and it's got all kinds of cool dragons and dungeons and entries and statues and all kinds of stuff. A lot of stuff will likely be junk, and I'll throw it away. But some of the stuff is going to be very cool. Once I hook it up, it'll be some very, very evocative dungeon scenery, which I'll be able to use. I have been playing a lot, mostly a lot of times on computer games, which are really, really not like playing. It's kind of like wasting time. But been playing a lot of role-playing games, been kind of working on my center here so I can start doing gaming for everybody. And I'm having a lot of fun with the new fantasy trip. I'm running my Twilight of Fae / Planescape campaign, where I'm sort of bashing these together. Kudos to Craig for coming up with the idea of using Planescape. It really adds a whole new dimension. Just ran a game this past weekend. Very interesting. A lot more talkie-talkie games for me, which is unusual. I really like the miniatures and the melee and the terrain and everything, and that's really been great. But a lot of the adventures I've run the last two have been mostly talking back and forth, trying to solve the mystery. And I think a lot of that has to do with a complete change in venue, and that you're now seeing these new creatures coming into the world that you were not expecting to see. It's been a lot of fun, and we should be doing a lot more here very soon. A lot of it, I'm hoping that if you're in the Orange County area, you'll be able to come down and play games with me, or do painting, or whatever is in the interest of helping you guys move your game forward. I plan to play a lot of board games, maybe have some tournaments, one of my favorite games, Up Front. If there's any Up Front players out there, if you know anybody who plays Up Front, one of my favorite desert island games, and I really would love to have a tournament of it. Playing a lot of Fantasy Trip, still playing D&D 5th. The interesting thing for me is I'm converting a lot of D&D creatures over to Fantasy Trip, which is challenging, but fortuitously I've been doing this for so long, it's really not that difficult. I kind of know what to expect from the creatures originally, and I know what the characters are capable of doing. If anything, I've sort of underpowered the monsters a little bit. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that my last adventure, they ran into a Mind Flayer and 2 Grell, two of my favorite monsters in the game. They weren't as tough as I would have liked, but they seemed to be really, really scary to the party. I mean, they were expecting to die at any moment. So I guess the fear factor was there, and they did their job quite well, and it was a lot of fun. Now, what I wanted to talk to you about today was something briefly, but something I've been doing all my career of role-playing as a DM, and I think it's really important, and that is called, for me at least, the moral dilemma. It's something I add into a lot of games, and what it does is it drives forward the story. It also lets you sort of solidify your players to understand what their motivations and how they play. Also, it allows them to really focus on their characters and decide what kind of character they are. Are they evil? Are they neutral? Are they good? And with that, they can adjust their game style, and you can adjust your game to suit to the type of players that you have and the sort of characters that are playing. For me, it started out originally 40 plus years ago, where I just had it where monsters would run away if they started to lose, or they would beg for mercy, or try to parlay, or try to exchange gold or secrets or something for their lives, because I felt that that monsters needed to be something than just cardboard bad guys that you basically just knocked down and then you moved on to the next thing. It's not really fun. And as you know, I think you should run your own adventures. But if you're running modules, what I think would work really well for you is to do your own adventures, or at least start with it, with a link between one written adventure and a second written adventure. Maybe you would feel comfortable building a small adventure in between. And that's where I think a moral dilemma would help you. Because what it could do is allow you to run a published adventure, and then after you finish that, you have 3 options of where the adventures could go. Now, that's where the moral dilemma can come in. That's where you can decide, based upon what the characters do in this encounter, adventure, or however you run it, react. That gives you a better idea of what adventure you might want to run next and how you're going to tailor it, if you're going to tailor it at all, onto the players. Now, I think you should always be tailoring and reskinning written adventures. If you're not, because no 2 parties of adventures are ever going to be the same. So you want to make sure you make it as unique to that party as you possibly can. The moral dilemma I ran this time was in my Twilight of Fey. They were traveling to a gate to exchange a gold dragon egg for a mythical, legendary, magic singing sword called the Fey Mortham. Now, apparently their lord had been met by this red man, and he promised him this fabulous sword that would enhance his prestige amongst all the clans and help him in his plan to want to become king. He was willing to give up this gold dragon egg. His feeling was he wasn't sure how to necessarily hatch it, and if he did hatch it, he wasn't sure how he would control a gold dragon. They had a character who had a copper dragon that they had found at the same time, but he has since left for the island of Rhodes, which, for those of you who don't know, is Rhode Island. And though it is not the end of the world, you can see it from there. I feel badly for him. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get some gaming in with him when he comes back out for a visit. Maybe he can start a group back there. He is painting miniatures, so I know that is a good sign. But I sure miss him, and I wish he was back here to be playing with us. But on with the moral dilemma. The party was moving forward with their escort, and he was guiding them to the gate so they could transfer there to make this trade. As they came upon a battle scene, the carrion were around, smoke was billowing in the air, and the dead laid unburied and untouched where they fell on the battlefield. Now, as they approached, they realized what they had here was a human party of knights and men-at-arms had attacked an elven caravan of more likely some civilians and some guards, with the hope of slaughtering all the elves and gathering up their booty, potentially their treasures, maybe capturing prisoners, learning more about the elves so that they can beat their foe. For those of you, I guess, who do not know, my Twilight of campaign is the death of Fey, and takes place in ancient mythical England, and what you have is the elves are the bad guys to the human player characters that people start with. So, the options for, they search through the battle site, finding the dead, picking up what gear they could possibly use, looking for cure potions and a few gold pieces, and they come across a wounded knight who is badly injured and likely will die without attention. Now, he comes from one of their allied clans. He's the son of their lord, so it's a big deal to potentially save this character. Their clerics jump into action and they save him and heal him up. He would have died otherwise. So they then realize that they need to then most likely take him off to his father's realm so that he can get better healing and people to take care of him because they have a mission to fulfill. Well, while they're searching around amongst the elven wagons that are destroyed and burning and the dead elves and the dead tree men that are lying there that apparently had caused most of the carnage amongst the humans, they open up a tent of a not so totally destroyed elven wagon, which I described as sort of woven of tree branches and weaved, and nothing that looked like a human wagon or any sort of thing that the humans would use. As they open it up, they find 3 elderly elven women and a young elven boy, relative speaking, who's brandishing a broken dagger. And it looks like he's going to try desperately to protect these women from the evil humans who he's sure are going to eat them. Now, the party has a dilemma. What are they going to do? The elves are their enemy, but these are obviously not combatants. one of the players kind of astutely says it's kind of odd that this child has 3 female caregivers with him. He might be somebody important, so we might not want to just kill him willy-nilly. Some of the party decide, well, wait a second. We're enemies with these people, and they have caused a lot of death and destruction amongst the humans. Maybe we should take him with the wounded knight back to our allied realm and give them to them. They let that king decide what he is going to do with these elves. But they realize what they're likely going to do is torture, murder, maybe worse. And that's not necessarily what all the characters wanted to do. Some of them are like, yes, that's what we should do. We hate the elves. The elves are our mortal enemy. We should help our ally, help seal the relationship, and turn these prisoners over to them. Others are like, well, wait a second. This is not, this is a child and some old elves. They're not combatants. Do we really want to seal their fate by giving them to the humans, or even maybe kill them ourselves? That seems unfair. Maybe we should try to find their realm. Now, that was pointed out by many of the party members that finding an elven realm with a pile of humans might end up in a hail of arrows and a lot of dead characters. So they thought, well, that's not really going to work. So they were able to sort of inquire with one of the female elves that they knew how to get back to their realm. So if they would just let them go, they would get assistance. The party bickered back and forth. What moral outcome are we going to have? Are we going to slay them? We're going to turn them over to the humans with the knight we're going to take back? Or are we going to release them? The thing about a moral dilemma you must remember as a game master is you can make no judgments. No matter how bleak or evil, you might give people a moral dilemma that's really, really nasty, much harder to make a decision on than this one was. The party decided, look, we don't want to turn them over to the humans. We know what's going to happen. We can't keep them. We don't want to kill them. So if they know how to get home, we will escort them to the edges of the woods and then bid them a fond farewell and wish them luck on their journey, and then go on, take the knight back to his kingdom. He's unconscious, so he's not going to know anything about these elves. We'll talk it up, what a great victory it was to the Lord there, try to make some kudo points for our king, and then we'll be on to our mission. Now, that's what they did. They released the elves, surprised at. They expected to die. As they were being released, the boy, realizing that he was not going to be killed, removed an odd ring from his finger and gave it to the person who had escorted him the entrance of the woods and had given him a fresh dagger so that he could defend himself if something had tried to waylay them on their trip. And they bid them well, and on the way they went. They returned the wounded knight to his family. A feast was had, much hurrahing was had, sadness, of course, for the loss of the death of the soldiers that were killed, but much happiness in the elves that were slain, and the fact that they have cleared out some of this area and allowing their realm to be more protected in the future. Now, the party continued on to their mission. There's moral dilemmas involved in that as well, but they're being followed and stalked by a unit of elven wolves with basically rangers, and they're shadowing the party. Had they killed the elves or turned them over to the humans, this would have been a straight encounter, and the party would have been under attack by a very strong force. Might have been the strongest force that I actually had in the adventure, but they didn't. They made a decision, and those moral dilemma decisions that people make always have to come with some form of consequence. Now, maybe the consequence is no good deed goes unpunished. A lot of times that's going to be up to you. But again, the thing I will reiterate is the most important thing to do is never, never, never put your biases into it, and never judge the decisions based upon what the players make. Because if that is what you do, players from that point on will try to please you and not play their characters the way they should. And really what you're hoping for here is to expand your storyline and get some sort of character real generation here where the characters become a character of their own, and the life springs forward from these characters to make your adventures more interesting in the future. Want people to feel like they're in an ongoing story. I know when you watch the two Matts and you're watching their adventures, you understand that both of these are creating their own material. And thusly, the stories become very personal. Matt always liked my Twilight of Fey Albion games because he said he could tell it was the game I was most invested in the story and what happened in the outcome. Now, that may or may not be true. I sometimes think Empire of the Petal Throne or a lot of other different games that I've run have been very near and dear to my heart. Now, there's lots more I want to talk about. So I'll try to get some more Monster Mambos up for you. Maybe I'll try to do a little bit more Fantasy Trip since people have been asking about it. Though I always worry that really the interest level in Fantasy Trip isn't as high. So I don't want to necessarily do a video for 5 people. But there's good things going on, and we'll talk about them in the future. If you're following me on Twitter, you might want to do that because you'll see more of the things I'm doing day in and day out. And once I open up my gaming facility and we start having things, I'll start putting little blog messages up here so you guys can hopefully come down and play some games, and we'll get some tournaments and things going. And then we'll try to get the big international campaign started. So until I have a chance to speak with you again, fight me, devils, fight, for I hate peace. Everybody have a good Thanksgiving. Talk to you soon.